Welcome to the Au Jus. I'm your host, Beef Loaf. This show is being powered by From the 108 and FromThe108.com, where you can get all of our content, top to bottom. Blogs, podcasts, and videos, including the world-famous Sunday Soak. You can also get all of our merch there as well, including the infamous Wave Sucks and hashtag 108 in garb. Currently, we have a Wake Me for the Parade koozie selling at FromThe108.com. It's $5. Go get one, go get 10. It's the kind of thing that never goes out of style, especially with these White Sox. This show is powered by you, the loyal 108 supporter. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to tickle the undercarriage in the process. Like, comment, turn on notifications, and most definitely super chat, because that's how we get paid, and that's how we continue to make the content you know and love. Tonight's guest... He is the former host of a long-defunct podcast that was one of my personal favorites, ChiSox Weekly. Since then, he's become the founder of OnTapSportsNet, which is a comprehensive sports website. He's personally one of the main contributors to the Four Feathers podcast, which covers the Blackhawks, and the Sox on Tap podcast, which live streams White Sox post-game shows year-round. It's been a long time coming for me to have this guy on here. Tony Marchese, welcome to the Au Jus.
What's going on, Mr. Beeflow? How are you?
Wonderful, man. When I was first putting this show together, we decided one of the angles was going to be content. We're going to talk to people doing content. Treasy and I were like, well, you got to get Tony on. Tony's been doing this shit for as long as kind of anyone in the pool, especially with the podcasting game. So I'm glad to have you on. How you doing? Are you well, my friend?
I mean, I could be better. It's been a rough year if you're in the White Sox podcast business, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, yeah, we're doing well. How are you?
Really good. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's one of those things. We've been doing it so long, and you've been doing podcasts even longer, Tony. You know the ebbs and flows of, well, here's how we got to attack it when they're bad. Here's the way we got to look at things. Here's the stuff we got to make fun of or make it more humorous, as opposed to just like, well, we have a good team now, we're charging ahead. You kind of got to feel that out. I do see like a lot of young podcasts. I put on Twitter that 12 podcasts died from the Sox loss, but us old folks, we know how to keep keeping on, right? I mean, that's what we do.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting year. I know you don't want to talk too much White Sox here, but I have to while I'm here just ask you, how are you feeling about the sell-off, Rebuild 3.0? I know you're a big Rebuild 3.0 guy, along with my co-host NWI Steve over there at Sox on Tap. So just get it out of the way, man.
You know what? I was never a huge fan of the original Rebuild. Like I saw it as like, okay, at least you took a position. At least you tried something here. I like the old Kenny Williams way of like, we're kind of bad. Let's do some shit, turn the roster over, and see if we can get better quickly. Han never did that. Han just never kind of attacked it in that approach. So this little sell-off looked a little more like the old Kenny Williams days. Like they knew they were cooked, so they're going to make some moves here. And the Jake Burger thing, which I don't like. I'm a Jake Burger fan, and this team needs thump. But at least it looked like, okay, we're taking a risk here. We're going to try to do something. So I'm always glass half full. Like I have bets from before the year for them winning the division and winning over 83.5 games. Neither of those are looking great right now, Tony. I got to be honest with you. We're not looking to cash those tickets. But I just kind of play it as it goes. Like I don't love it. I don't. The excitement right now around the returns are hilarious to me in a way. We did a segment last week on the 108 podcast making fun of the excitement for all the prospects that failed from the last time. It's just like a reminder to people that like, most of these guys won't make it. And with this pile that you're getting, there's no Luis Robert in that group. The last time we had a Luis Robert in the group, like you can kind of hang your hat on. We don't. This is just like if you get one or two decent major leaguers out of this, you did great out of that sell-off.
Yeah, I still remember bringing. I know you brought up ChiSox Weekly, and we'll probably get into that in a minute here. But I still remember My Sox Summer coming on there during the draft, right after we picked Nick Madrigal. Yeah. So, yeah, that was excellent analysis.
Big prospect guy, My Sox Summer.
Huge.
Loves all that stuff. Yeah, speaking of ChiSox Weekly, I want to get into this a little bit because this predates a lot of stuff. This predates 108 having a podcast. We had a blog, and we were on Twitter and acting like dickheads, but we did not have a podcast back then. You had ChiSox Weekly, you and my man ChiSox Jonda. And so tell me about how you got into that, because that was early. There were not a lot of White Sox podcasts back when you got into that podcast.
No, there weren't. I think it was Redline Radio with White Sox Dave was sort of White Sox centric.
And it was only half of a White Sox podcast because Carl would have the Cubs side.
And I know the Sox Machine guys were doing it back then as well.
But it was at
But
Southside Sox, right? It was before they moved back over to Sox Machine. We were at Southside Sox, I think,
it
when
was
you
right
guys
around
started
the same
it.
time. It was right
Okay.
around the same time they moved over. But
Okay.
there wasn't a lot. I remember we started at a site called ChiSportsNation.com. And myself and Jonda, a couple other people were within their writing section doing some blogs.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided, hey, why not start a podcast as well? And what's interesting is I play in a fantasy baseball league with Justin Havens, who used to work with Barstool, did Starting Nine. He was their producer.
Okay.
And so I sort of chummed it up with him a little bit, and he sort of showed me the ropes on how to record these things, not in person. I know you guys started doing them in person, but actually like over the internet. So it was early Skype days. I don't think anybody still uses Skype to record podcasts, but he sort of helped us out, give us the playbook on how you can do that, the software that you needed to record and capture a Skype call. And this predates Zoom. So that was interesting. So when we started it, there was actually a third guy. I don't even remember his name at this point in time, who was involved in these chats to start what was ChiSox Weekly with Jonda and myself. I don't think he ever appeared on an episode, but he was there for a couple of brainstorming messages that went back and forth. And that's sort of when I jumped into the Twitterverse is right at the onset of that, the first episode of ChiSox Weekly, which was recorded on, I believe it was St. Patrick's Day night. And I remember Jonda was like living underneath a bar or above a bar, and it was super loud. It was great times. But yeah, I mean, I've got tons of old ChiSox Weekly stories here for you if you want them.
Well, I was going to say, I kind of remember it because it wasn't, you guys did delve into the Sox Twitterverse, so you would have guests on from Sox Twitter, and you would have like personality guests. So it wasn't just like XYZ guy is, from, announces for some minor league team or something. You would have random motherfuckers. You had Herb Lawrence on there very early. Like, I can't ever remember Herb Lawrence being on a podcast before that. You had Brian Billick on there. Now, Future Sox kind of had
you and Brian Billick were on the same episode.
We were on the same episode. You guys, you bombarded me with him, and we had a lot of fun though, giving each other shit back and forth. But like, you were the first ones, kind of like bringing in people from the Sox Twitterverse and kind of getting that mixture there. What was the impetus for you and Jonda doing that? And how did you and Jonda initially like brainstorm to get those early podcasts going?
So we started the first few episodes was just Jonda and I. And I remember one of the first most influential guests that we had on that sort of broke the mold for us to go into this and do a more guest-centric show was actually Harry Tynowitz. Was
I remember this
first guest.
Yes.
And, afterwards, we were with the site, Chi Sports Nation, and Harry comes on and he asks us before the show, he's like, can we swear? And we're like, well, sure, you can swear, I think. And I remember getting a nasty Slack message like the day that published. And they're like, you might need to tone that down a little bit. And, Harry told us after the episode, just be yourselves. And I think that that's something that you've said a lot. Just be yourself when you're on air. And we're like, okay, well, let's run with it. So then I think we doubled down and we brought you guys on like the next week or a week or two after. I think White Sox Dave was in there as well.
Yeah, White Sox Dave was early guest.
We just started to roll through this, and we noticed that we picked up a ton of steam with bringing on guests within White Sox Twitter. And if you remember correctly, this was like the early rebuild days.
Yes.
So everybody in the White Sox community was super excited. There was so much content being produced by everybody that we brought on. And it was just it just rolled week to week. And I think that really was, if I look back at it, one of the reasons the show was successful is because we had so many different voices coming on each and every week.
Yeah, and you guys had fun with it too. Like you did serious analysis, but you also weaved in kind of just like having fun and goofing off and talking about things that were happening at the ballpark or whatever. You guys also did a great giveaway where you brought a fan of the show on as a guest, which I thought was one of like most interesting, cool giveaways you could possibly do, especially like early on with podcasts. We're going like you guys ran a promotion and you literally had a person who listens just, hey, you're going to come on to the show. That was great.
Yeah, we actually met him at the game too. I think that was like Kopech Day to give away the. I forget what we gave away but there was something else. I think it was a shirt or a ChiSox Weekly shirt or something at the time, and then. brought the listener on who won the competition, and that was awesome. I think Wally Money was also on that. We had like a 3-parter at one point with like Wally Money, a guest listener. There was tons of names. I was looking back at it when after you had sent me over this little agenda here that we're talking about, and I went through like the like episode list, and there's names of people who are no longer even part of White Sox Twitter that were guests on the show. So there's some good history there, and I'm planning to keep that up for as long as I possibly can, just living on the internet.
I absolutely love that. I mean, you mentioned you had us on there kind of early on in the thing, and I remember you guys having us on in the recording session. So you're a fucking night owl. This is what I remember from recording. You and John would start recording at like 9:00 at night or something like that. So we all went to Terezi's 9:00. We do a 3-hour episode with you guys, but not only do we a 3-hour episode, we took like a couple breaks, and one of the breaks was 45 minutes where we're not recording. We're just shooting the shit. I mean, I must have got home 2:30 in the morning from recording an episode. And that was, you guys would have a few pops, like this was like, we would too. While we were talking, those were awesome times. It's like early Sox Twitter podcasting days.
Yeah, that was, I think we finished up about 3 hours and 4 minutes on that show. And that was even before we brought Johnny Nani into the equation, too. Because I think the Sox on 35th episode came somewhere in the middle of the first season of guests. And he eventually became a full-time host with Jonda and I. But those were off the rails, just 2 or 3 hours per recording session. And then one thing that I learned through this, and I don't know how you guys still do it, but we edited these things like down from what we actually had recorded.
Yeah.
And the process to edit these things took days. Like it took days to get it to final product.
Yeah.
So it was a big production. There was a lot of time spent on those episodes.
Yeah. We just do live streams now materially.
Yeah, so do we.
And so there's no editing. Like, it's just like, this is it. And we're loading this thing up there and it's in the podcast. I do remember that, Tony. I also remember you were going to have the Sox on 35th guys on. I reached out to you, Inside Baseball here. I was like, man, these guys are fucking boring, man. You're going to have to, and your episode you had with them was terrific. Like, you guys did such a good job of like bringing their personalities out, getting it to be like a fun show. And so I remember those ChiSox Weekly days. I would look forward to when you guys had a guest on, even if it was someone that I wasn't particularly interested in, because you guys would really drag out, the fun out of the people, basically.
Well, we set like a minimum drink requirement for hopping on these things. And of course, we had them all at like 9:00. I think one of the best episodes that we did have, I know it's a little too soon for some people, but was Jake Berger. When we had Jake Berger on, I got to give John a lot of credit because at this point, Berger was still down in Arizona. I think he was living with Dane Dunning at the time. And we had a segment called The Hot Seat at that point, or Quick Hits, I think it was. Okay. And it was just quick fire questions that John
it was a this or that kind of question, right? I remember correctly. Yep.
Yeah, and it was phenomenal because he had walked over. I think Dane Dunning was in the middle of playing live video games or something, and Berger walks into the room and is like, "Here, you're on this podcast," and ran him through quick hits, and that was gold. I mean, both guys are gone now, but it was still really fun to get to interview those guys, and both now have fairly successful major league career. So that was a cool moment for us.
Absolutely. And that was a long time ago. It was like 2017 or something, 2018 or whatever. That was a while back. Speaking of Jonda, do you still keep in touch with ChiSox Jonda at all?
You know what? I haven't heard from him in a while, Lo, if I'm being honest. His brother still is part of OnTapSportsNet.
Brandon.
Brandon Suarez. Yep. He does a wonderful show for the NIU Huskies on Tap. As well as betting content for OnTapSportsNet still. So I'm still in touch with them, through Brandon, but I haven't heard from John. I'm not even sure if he's still on Twitter or not.
It's so funny. The only reason I knew he was still on Twitter is not this past year's 108 Tourney Field, but the year before, he soft blocked all the 108ers after I didn't have him in the field. And he was kind of cursing us out on Twitter, and I was thinking, I haven't seen you tweet and about anything, not even just the White Sox. How I even know you're here to do this? But apparently he was pissed. So I want to let him know, Jonda, I still love you. I'm sorry I didn't have you in the tourney that year. It just didn't work out.
Yeah, I haven't heard from him either, but he's good people. I mean, that was a ton of fun. That show was awesome. I miss it sometimes. I still have the Twitter account, but I've thought about it for Rebuild 3.0, maybe spinning something up, but we'll see.
Bring it back, or have a reunion show. Maybe
Yeah,
that would be fun.
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
I don't think it'd be bad at all.
It'll be 8 hours long, and I'll line up almost every guest that we had on the original show.
Just live stream that bitch all night. I love it. You had us on a couple times. You mentioned at least one. I think we were on 2 or 3 times back in the ChiSox Weekly days. And like we were saying before, you had a lot of Sox Twitter people on. Is there any guest that you wish you would have had on during that period, or that you guys tried to get and just couldn't line it up, that you like regret not having during that period of time?
That's a tough question, actually, because we had a ton of guests on. I think we started to hit the point where we were running out of guests when we got to Wally Money.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough.
But, I wish we had the opportunity to get a few more of the players on. I know we had Sebi Zavala.
Yep.
We had Berger and the brief appearance from Dane Dunning. I think it would have been a really awesome opportunity to get some of the other personalities on there. I don't know if you guys ever connected with Polka to get him on your show. But he seems like a kind of guy that would have been great on ChiSox Weekly.
Yeah, he's exactly the personality type, Tony. I'm generally don't care for player interviews, but a guy like him or a guy like Berger, they have great personalities. So you definitely no. We've had discussions. We've missed a couple times when we were going to have him on, and then we just couldn't line up schedules. I think, and not breaking news or anything, but if we can get him lined up to come on for Festivus this year, we may try to get that hooked up. But yeah, no, not yet. And that is someone we definitely want to have on the 108 podcast for sure. All right, let's get to it. So ChiSox Weekly is going, it's moving, and at some point you decide, you know what, I don't want to just have one podcast that's doing really well on Sox Twitter. I want to build a media empire. So how the hell did you come up with the idea of, I'm going to do OnTapSportsNet, and I'm going to kind of build out this media brand? How did that come about?
So, as I mentioned earlier, we were with the Chi Sports Nation site, and after I had Johnny Nani on ChiSox Weekly, actually, him and I got really involved in some deep Blackhawks discussion in the after show. As you know from being on ChiSox Weekly, there's tons of sports that gets talked off air, or we're talked off air. And that went on for a while, and Johnny and I actually connected and said, hey, let's start up, maybe a Hawks blog or something, because he was working with Sox on 35th at the time, and there was no Hawks section. Well, lo and behold, the crew that was running the Chi Sports Nation Blackhawk section sort of dissipated into the abyss with the rest of, the 2010 through 2015 Blackhawks people who were probably covering the Hawks at the time. So I actually wound up as the Blackhawks section manager, which is where I wound up meeting Ron Luce, and I brought Johnny Nani on to do some of that writing there. And we decided, let's start Four Feathers Podcast, sort of to be the sister show of ChiSox Weekly. And I think our content was just a little bit more like ChiSox Weekly, where they were a little upset with how we were on the air and using certain profane words and, discussing things. And we had our own Twitter account for the show because we wanted to promote the show and really do that. And we didn't have really the backing from, the leadership there to be running our own Twitter account, which we thought was doing better than what was, corporate at the time.
Yeah. So you guys felt like if you could put your own promotion out on the Twitter account,
right,
you're just going to do a lot better. You guys already have a web and Sox Twitter where you can kind of use that group to get funnel people into listen. Yeah, it makes sense.
So we woke up one morning and all of our shit was shut off. So I called up Johnny and Ron at the time, and I said, hey, we're shut down here. So I actually, for a short period of time, ChiSoxWeekly.com was a thing. Mm-hmm. Not many people know that, but we were blogging ChiSoxWeekly.com, and we also had Four Feathers Podcast.com to do Hawks blogs, and we were running 2 different websites there for a little while. The real story, and you were there, Loaf, for part of it, was the Sox Cubs game on the 21st night of September. back in, what was that, 2018, 2019? I think it was 2018.
Yeah, it was my anniversary.
Sure that's your anniversary.
And I stayed in the parking lot smashing beers with you guys after the game. I told my wife and I already celebrated. I'm gonna go to the game. We'll hang out. I got drunk with you guys after the game. Yeah.
Yeah, Austin was there. My buddy Jake Trojan was there. It was a good time. We closed down Lot C. We got kicked out of there. We wound up at ChiSox. Yeah. And for some reason at ChiSox, we decided that we were just gonna like start this Chicago sports website. We already had the Blackhawks, the White Sox. Ron Luce, who was part of the Blackhawks crew, he does Cubs on tap. Yep. So we figured he would be in on that. And so we really needed a Bulls and a Bears guy was pretty much it, which is surprising because we had like the two teams that, nobody really covers. And then, you got the Cubs. And I think that was one of the reasons why White Sox Twitter became what it was that there's good media coverage, but it's not at the level that you get from some of the other teams. I mean, I think we can admit that as White Sox content creators.
No, and I think that's why we survive, Tony. That's why our brands can survive because people want that Sox content, and they're just not getting it from the major outlets. They gotta come and listen to our podcasts and live streams and post game shows and everything to kind of get all that they want. The media doesn't absorb it.
Right, and so we needed Bulls, and we left that. I think we left ChiSox and wound up at another bar, but that's not where we want to go with this. We met Buzz. I actually met Buzz through White Sox Twitter, and he was working at the railroad at the time. And as you mentioned before, I'm a night owl. So he was working nights at the railroad, and him and I would just talk about how, the opportunity the White Sox had to sign Manny Machado. That's honestly how him and I met was through back and forth on Twitter over Manny Machado, Bryce Harper talk. And he was running a show at the time called The Outcasts. I'm not sure if you were on that one as well. I think
I was. I don't think I was ever on it. I did listen to it sometimes though. Him and Juice would do that. Yeah. I remember that. Yep.
Yeah. So we got to conversing, and they were with Sports Mockery at the time. Yep. And, somehow I convinced him to join this crazy idea that was OnTapSportsNet. I don't even think it had a name at that point in time, but Johnny and I and my wife met up with Buzz on St. Patrick's Day. A lot of St. Patrick's Day things in here. We met up with him.
Booze makes good ideas come together.
Yes, it does.
That's what it is.
That's the moral of the story here.
Exactly.
For some reason, it was again on St. Patrick's Day, and we met up with Buzz at Bulldog Ale House in New Lenox, and over a couple of 2 Treat beers, we wound up deciding that he was going to come on, and we launched OnTapSportsNet shortly after opening day 2019. And Juice came along with him. He does Cub stuff with Ron. And we had a full house there. So we're like, let's just do this. And it's gone from there.
It's amazing. That's incredible. I remember there was an idea floating around, and you and I were talking about it, and Josh Nelson, it was actually Josh Nelson's idea. He's like, what if we figured out a way to take all the podcasts and make it like a radio station almost or whatever? And like when we were talking about like who else we'd add to it, like people would laugh now, like, because there's fucking 12 million Sox podcasts. But back then we were like, there ain't enough good podcasts for us to make the full lineup here. And I remember that. And then your thought was like, well, I could just go do, something broad like this as well, but I don't need to, it doesn't need to stick to White Sox. And so that's what you did. So what did the early days look like of you guys putting out content? You mentioned yourself, Nani, you've got Luce, and then Buzz is coming over. Like, so that's a small group, but you're already launching like 5 different brands. How the fuck are you getting this all done going?
I mean, it was sort of crazy, right? So we had no idea what we were doing really in the early days. It was sort of throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. And I think that's how most, things start. We had the blog. We knew what we were doing from the podcast side. I mean, Buzz had been doing podcasts far longer than I was. So we learned a lot from him. On top of that, Johnny's just an editorial wizard. So we had basically, what we needed to get this thing going. The early days were more or less a lot of the guys just calling up their friends and saying, hey, like, you've got sports thoughts, let's put them out there. And so I remember some of the early blogs that we wrote, Pat Comiskey, the first one that actually The first blog that actually really hit, and we'd call them blogs at the time.
Yeah.
The first blog that actually hit was Pat Comiskey writing about how Joe West needs to be ejected from baseball. And, we would just post stuff and throw it out there on Twitter. And Rob Lowe retweeted it. And we're like, what the hell is this?
Yes.
Rob fucking Lowe is retweeting an article about Joe West. And I didn't know that Rob Lowe had it out for Joe West, but apparently it did. And so the views start coming in. And then,
great.
we shifted focus towards SEO early on. How do we do this? How do we make it show up in Google? How do we get included into different, feeds and streams of sports news? And that was really what helped us propel it. And then from there, the views just kept growing. We had, an influx of talent that came on sort of throughout the first year, guys like NWI Steve, Pat Flowers. I don't know if you remember Pat Flowers. He was instrumental in sort of helping us.
He used to be Loop Sports back in the old days.
Yeah, he came from Loop Sports and came in and really helped us get some footing there. But I mean, it's really mainly been a combination of just everybody's efforts going towards putting out content, and it's nonstop. It goes every single day. We're not just managing one podcast or one blog. It's sports news for everything. You should see our Slack. It's constantly popping with just this happened or that happened. So a lot of good people who've come through here and really helped us grow. And then there's a lot of guys who've been here for pretty much the long haul.
That's interesting. You bring up you brought on NWA Steve. I remember. So Loop Sports is finite, and then he's kind of he's being courted, we'll say, by some of the groups or whatever. I had lunch with him. This is during the pandemic, so we're fucking masked up and everything. We're at Buffalo Wings Rings outside. We're having lunch. It's early-ish in the pandemic. It's warm by this point. And I'm asking him, how, what do you decide and where do you think you're going to go, whatever. And I told him before, I said, Steve, we can't afford to pay you because we're greedy and we soak up any profits we get. But we'll put your shit up until you're ready to go figure out where you want to go. He's like, that's really nice of you. And he said that he chose you guys because he felt like you guys just work harder than the other groups. You were just putting the effort in. And he's like, that's what he wanted to see. He wanted to be with a group that was going to work really fucking hard. And I'm like, well, I know you do. And I know in the early days, Nani was probably doing 50, 60 hours a week helping you, get the ship right. I don't know if that's still the same, but I remember back in the day, kid was working his ass off with that shit.
Yeah, it's really interesting how it's evolved because a lot of the guys are still sort of in their same roles. I would say we've got the guys that started it, Buzz, myself, Ron Luce, Johnny, and then we've had some really key additions along the way, guys like Steve, who've come in, and now I've shared a mic with him, and it gets obnoxious. I don't know how many times, I've had to hear about how great Pedro Grifol is. It just gets it gets a little tough after a while, but he's a good guy.
Let me give you your flowers right now, Tony, because after the 2022 season, so Tony has the illness and he leaves. I know you're a big La Russa guy. I run into Steve, and he said, I got fucking Marchese. He's such a big La Russa guy, and all, he'd get animated. So I wanted to listen to the show where you guys kind of did the postmortem. And I thought you did, for being like a La Russa guy, you did the fairest, most even-handed analysis of his managing there that I heard anyone fucking do. And I was thinking, this is really fucking great. I tried to be, it's tough to remove your emotionally where you stand with something or some player and really distill it down. I thought you were extremely fair with your thoughts on him in that show. So kudos to you. That was a really nice job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's what I'm trying to go for. I know it is hard. It's really tough, especially when you watch this team day in and day out, and you develop your own sort of thought process on how you would do it. I mean, I probably would have done it totally different than Tony La Russa did. Honestly, there's a lot of things I didn't like. I'll leave it at this. I just thought that some of the criticisms there were not exactly warranted, and I felt like I needed to speak on that. So that's why that was. And Steve was a Tony La Russa and still is a Tony La Russa hater. Believe it or not, that might be That might not be breaking news, big if true, but yeah. No,
but he left enough air there for you to let it out, and he didn't. He kind of got out of the way, so it was a really good job by both of you, just in context there. So you're getting this up and running. What early lessons did you learn? Building a brand of this size, kind of from scratch. You're going from having maybe 2 podcasts and some blogs going at once to just like, boom, you've got kind of all Chicago sports. I mean, you guys you do some pop culture stuff too. You got some of the college teams. Like, you got a lot of brands going here. What's some early lessons that you learned as you're going along, Tony?
I would say just jump right into it. If there's something that you're interested in, a lot of this is just passion. Everything that I've done when we bring new contributors on or start a new, section or coverage unit, as I like to think of them as, you call them brands. That's probably a better word for it. But it's more about the people who are producing that content for it. If they're passionate about it, if they're committed to doing it, there's paths to success. You have to be committed. And that's the number one thing. There's not a lot of time to roll back and say, why are we only producing one show every month? Or why are we? So you can start to see if people can actually handle it as you go in. So it's a leap of faith every single time you start one of these things. And luckily for me, I've had a lot of people who have been part of this, who are extremely passionate, who do work hard, who do make the sacrifices to make it happen. And that's really honestly how it's been successful, but that does take a leap of faith. Other than that, I would say, like, on the more technical side, you have to almost treat it like it's a career or a hobby that you're extremely interested in. This has changed dramatically since when we both started. So
for sure,
you have to stay up to date on this stuff. Like, we're both on StreamYard right now. Neither of us were on StreamYard a couple of years ago. And you have to like adapt. I mean, it is really an adapt or die type game here, creating content. So there's a lot of work that I don't think people who consume it really realize go into the back end, not even from just the content production,
right,
but also scheduling, technicality, like technical work that goes into it. I remember when we were talking back in the early days, and I think I had told Marchese, like, you guys can do a podcast. He's like, I don't want to do tech work after I'm done doing tech work.
Yes.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. I would say the main key though is, like, try and have fun with it. It can get a little bit, it can become a grind really quick for a lot of people. So you have to find joy in that. And I think our group collectively likes to find joy in making fun of NWI Steve. I know Matt Berkland does. I know Ron Luce does.
Yeah.
So you've got to have somebody within your group that you can collectively poke fun at. That's the real key to success.
That's absolutely true. I mean, there's one thing of, like, knowing the teams in and out and being able to, like, analyze that, but there's also, like, coming up with concepts. Like you said, booking guests, like, okay, thinking ahead, who we're going to have on for this thing, who's the perfect person for this. Some of this shit is spur of the moment. Like, we had Loud Chuck on, the guy who got hit by the car out in front of Sox Park, got flipped into the car. Like, that was just...
I heard about that story. That is absolutely crazy.
My Sox Summer and I were just, because Treasy was out that week, we were just like, fuck, should we just ask this guy? Is he going to get pissed that we're asking him? Like, guys probably... And he was in the hospital, and he's like, Beef, I'll do it if I get out of the hospital. And the guy got out, and it's like, some shit spur of the moment like that. Some of it is like, you're building relationships to try to work to get somebody on there, So, like, you're right, it is kind of a longer putt with some of this. You mentioned, the people, passionate people that you have in your group, and I know that to be true because some of these guys have been there a long time and they're still grinding away and they still seemingly love it. Like, you're managing all these brands. How do you acquire talent? How do you bring in talent? Like, what's your method, Tony, of doing this? Because I've talked to others who run kind of larger groups like this, and the bottom line is they say it's extremely hard to find good people, very hard.
Oh, you can ask anybody that has worked with us for 3-4 years now that it is extremely hard. I know, myself and Buzz really have done that as well as Ron. And we've got an evaluation process that Johnny's part of, reading submissions and stuff like that. And for every one person that winds up sticking, you go through probably about like 10 or 15 conversations that take place. I've got to give a lot of credit to Buzz, really, Loaf, in terms of, fielding a lot of those conversations. Ron as well. It's a constant, literally a constant search for more people. I've probably got 5 or 6 different spots open right now that we've been working to fill for quite a while. So I'm with everybody else that you've talked to. It's extremely difficult. There's people who will come on and they'll write one thing or jump on one podcast, and then you might never hear from them again. Like, we've had plenty of people that have done that. And not that that's a bad thing. I think a lot of people think they have enough time to put this into their lives. I would warn most people, I don't know about you, but like, this is a commitment. It does take up a lot of time.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we've got a good group of people that have put enough time into this to make it what it is at this point. But in terms of sourcing talent, we look through Twitter for people who, are similar, like-minded thoughts about, sports and stuff, have well thought out opinions. We've, found people from the deep, dark depths of Reddit. In fact, one of our Bears guys, Butkus Stats. I don't know if you've seen Butkus Stats.
On Twitter,
yeah. He does amazing analytical work with football stuff, and he was from Reddit. He was posting these long, well thought out posts on Reddit, and we're like, hey man, like, if you put this online, like, we'll pay you to do it. It's like better than probably just doing it on Reddit for some upvotes. And now he's been on a bunch of different shows, started his own betting podcast, done a bunch of stuff.
Nice.
We found people from, every different place you can find them. In fact, there's also guys who've come on that you just, meet at a bar, and it's like, hey, you have a great conversation, and, they all of a sudden wind up as part of OnTapSportsNet. So I don't know what the magic answer here is. It's a cast a wide net approach, I guess, is probably the best way to go about it.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys are always looking. It sounds like you're kind of like always in the mode of how could this person maybe fit in, and then just trying a lot of parts. And it's funny you bring up, like, someone was funny. I remember you guys had Unprotected Socks on. You were the first ones to have him on as a guest as anything. I'm like, this dude's fucking hilarious. Now, he's not on Twitter anymore, but like, yeah, that's like an example of there's someone out of the clear fucking blue that, no one knew who that was. You had him on as a guest. I see Sox Insane's in the comments. He says, real motherfuckers don't podcast, they blog. I was going to ask you, Sox Insane specifically, did you hire him because he looks so much like Ted Kaczynski? Because every time I see the dude, I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to mess with this guy when I see him on Twitter or anything.
I mean, he did bail me out one time. There was a time that, my Tony La Russa love almost got me into a fight at the ballpark, and Sox Insane was the guy to shut that shit down real quick. So,
Nice.
I tried to do a little man on the street action with somebody who was very loud about Tony La Russa, and it went very, very poorly. So thank you, Sox Insane. You saved me. No, I didn't hire him. I actually didn't even see Sox Insane before he hopped on OnTapSportsNet. But he's come on, and he's blogged his ass off doing the Sox recaps, and that's another piece that it really goes sort of under the radar here, because we're doing all the podcast stuff. He's filled in on the podcast. I've had to call him up when we've, put Steve on the IL, or had to send him down to Charlotte and have him cover something over there. But, he's another motherfucker that's out there that's dedicated as hell doing this shit day in and day out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What do you do? So from the creative side a little bit here, what do? You have these teams set up, and they have their roles. Do they ever come to you and pitch ideas that are kind of outside the realm of their roles? Do they ever say, like, hey, I got a great idea for a pie, or I got a great idea for just some one-off thing, a video or whatever the fuck? Do you get any of that sort of stuff, Tony? Or is it sort of everyone stays in their lane, and like, how does it work? How does that part work potentially?
I don't have lanes really at all for any of this. In fact, Sox Insane and Schwartzy did one of the most off-the-wall OnTapSportsNet things we've ever done. It's up on our YouTube. We had the Trailer Park Boys on live in character
Ridiculous.
to pitch to their, or not to pitch, but sort of to do the intro to their Thanksgiving Day feast that the Trailer Park Boys were doing.
Okay.
And we recorded this piece of content. It actually aired prior to their Canadian Thanksgiving special on Laugh Factory TV or whatever the internet TV station that they're on. But we will take on any sort of content that we really can. It's definitely, we love the outside of the box stuff, and try and do our best with it. In fact, like I myself, I'm going to cover the BMW Championship this week. Starts tomorrow with the practice rounds and everything. So we're doing golf, we're doing stuff with the Trailer Park Boys, we're doing anything we can to just produce content. So we love the outside of the box stuff. I would say that for the most part, a lot of guys will come on and sort of find their groove with something. Yeah. For example, like Sox Insane can go do that, but he's also done stuff with the Bulls. He's done stuff with the Bears. I know that breaks up the monotony because anybody who covers the Sox is literally insane. So you got to pull them back to reality a little bit. But no, I love when we come up with, something that is feasible. Like we get a lot of ideas that probably never come to fruition just because of timing or stuff that we've got to do to, I hate to be so super corporate, but like keep the lights on work, just making sure that we still hit our numbers and get to where we need to get to. But anything that we can do that's fun. I mean, that's why we do this. So yeah, definitely love when we get outside the box ideas.
I love it. From a content standpoint, I agree with you. Throw everything at it and see what ideas you think could work. And even some shit you think might not work is probably worth trying for sure. Are you going to get Summer George out of retirement to eat some more hot dogs? I mean, that was a pandemic thing and it was fun. Like, is that ever coming back? Is he ever coming back?
I would love to do that. I haven't really talked to Summer George in a while, but I would love to do that. I know one of the things that I've wanted to do for a long time is get Summer George, NWI Steve, and Ron Luce on a stage in front of everybody and do the timed hot dog eating contest, the way it's done on the 4th of July, and see who takes home the crown there. Might have to extend an invite out to King Nam, have him up there if he's interested.
We'll get him coached up. Yeah, that would be a nice. I got to be honest with you, Luce can really take down some hot dogs. He might be the one who ends up winning that thing.
Well, he beat Summer of George. We did have a contest that was at the Chicago Dogs Stadium back during the pandemic days, and Ron Luce took him down. I was very disappointed in George not going for the last hot dog that was on the table. There's some pictures of him just sweating that one out.
He was cooked.
There was a bathroom break that was involved in there. We're not sure what happened when they both ran to the bathroom, but they both came out at the same time, and
they probably made out.
Yeah, Luce put down that last hot dog, and then the rest was history. I think the final score there was like 14 to 12 or 13 to 11, somewhere around there in a 9-inning baseball game. But I want to put him up there, 4th of July style, and really figure out who the hot dog champion is. Do
the 10 minutes and have him, dunking it in the water and all that shit. I would love it. You mentioned, overseeing all the people, talent, and obviously keeping the lights on too. There's certain content things you just have to kind of deliver on, whether it's contractually obligated by an ad read or things that other revenue generators. How do you evaluate your various contributors? Is it based on the amount of volume they create? Would you ever have someone you're like, well, they're not doing great numbers, but they are doing good work? Kind of, is quality like with some combination? How do you evaluate kind of the outputs from the various people, Tony? Because it can, in some ways, you can be very analytical with that sort of thing. Other ways you can be very subjective as far as like, well, this piece of content is just valuable to us, even if it's not a big earner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for me personally, I sort of look at, what's the potential there? Most of the guys that work for OnTapSportsNet all have, full-time gigs. Some have families. Some are just super knowledgeable about something. And when you need them, it's sort of like a guy off the bench. So it's super difficult to sort of spread that out across an organization and know who's going to come in clutch for you where. And, I think one of the biggest challenges that we've had personally is, when people look across the room, you get bystander effect, right? Like, well, nobody's picking this up. and so it'll sit, and you got to poke and prod. But then there's certain people who are more or less well equipped to handle a certain situation. It's almost like managing a bullpen. And then you've got your it's almost like the White Sox clubhouse, right? This guy's sleeping. Yeah, but for lack of a better term, it's all about the utility for each and every single contributor. We've got guys who come on and just do video editing and are really good at it. There might not necessarily be somebody who's going to write for us. On the other end of that, we've got guys who are great Blackhawks historians and know a ton about that, and can throw up something about Blackhawks history that somebody else is not going to be able to get to. Other guys are great at writing recaps. Other guys, produce a ton of volume. So it's sort of a giant juggling act is really what it is. Right. I would say, if you get to a point where you're Beer Garden Jim and you haven't written a beer review in probably, I think, like 8 or 9 months, you're just somewhere on my list of like people I need to follow up with and ask if you still, need to be here or not.
Absolutely love it. That's terrific. Good sideswipe of Beer Garden Jim. Let's move off of OnTap Sports to close this out. I want to talk about creativity just kind of in general, as we've been doing Content Game both for a long time. We were DMing back and forth leading up to this conversation. And you said that, it's something to the fact that, a lot of this is just having the courage of hitting send, of just having the impetus, be able to push yourself at hitting send. What did you mean by that, Tony?
I think in the grand scheme of things, every one of us got on Twitter at some point and was like, what the fuck do I do with this? Like, what am I going to do here? And you're sort of entering a different social circle is really what it is. So
right.
When I talk about just hitting send, I think there's probably, this is just my estimation on it, whether it's White Sox, Cubs, Bears, whatever, it could be non-sports related. Whenever you're entering a different social group or, even if it's a hobby, whatever it is, you sort of have to take that time to learn what's going to work here and what's not. And in terms of like being a content creator, my thought is there's a lot of content that doesn't get created because people don't have that confidence yet to hit send on it, whether it's a tweet, whether it's a blog, whether it's firing up a StreamYard for the first time. And I think a lot of that sort of stems from, the existing establishments of what's out there already. That's really where I want to go with this is,
yep.
I think, and I've heard this enough with my own group, and I'm not sure if this is a problem elsewhere, but there's definitely enough room for two people to have the same or similar thoughts. For example, your Jake Berger blog that you just wrote the other day. I think there's probably 5 or 6 other people who have blogs within the White Sox community that probably somewhat near agree with you, but don't go and write something similar because they don't want to step on toes. They're afraid to either share an opinion with somebody else, or they just plain and simple think this is already out there, so I'm not going to do it. And right. I think that sort of stalls out, what we see within the content community versus what you see in, I would call established media, right? Because every time there's a story with established media, everybody's running the same thing, just a slight different variation of it. You can follow the White Sox beat reporters for long enough and realize it's the same thing coming from right. And I'm not for like diluting the message down, but at a certain point, you have to find your entry ramp and just go with it. And I don't think that there's ever really anything wrong as long as you're not like copy pasta job somebody else's work, because you don't want to do that. That's a way to get yourself sort of screwed there. If you've got an original thought on a topic, it's okay to agree with another content creator and just put that out there. In fact, sometimes that's where you see the change in how, a group of people or, people view a situation. Is it coming from different voices? I think people get too afraid of the echo chamber or sounding like an echo chamber rather than building on somebody else's point or taking a piece of content and expanding on it with your own thoughts. Everybody wants to be the first one out and be the right opinion. And I think that that's the wrong way to go about this, because if you're doing that, you're not taking enough shots. You're simply not. You have to put out probably, I mean, how many blogs do you guys put out per year?
I don't know, a couple hundred, but we take some real risks when we put them out. We're not just like parroting something or putting. Usually, our ideas are going to be something that's probably not you're going to find everywhere. So I agree with you, Tony. Throw it out there, especially if it's not exact. You know, like you mentioned, the beat reporters, kind of all the mainstream media, all doing the same thing. A twist on someone else's idea is oftentimes where the jumping off point is for you to like, oh, I can go down a path here. And some of these big shooters with a lot of followers are going to be like, fucking right, I like that idea, and give you a little push because it's something unique. It's something to put out there. It's like, I agree with you. And we put shit out there, and it's like, I put it out there in a off-season plan that I would have traded Luis Robert at the end of 2018. That's just stupid shit, right? But sometimes you got to take a chance and think. I put a blog out during the pandemic that I thought it was time to trade Michael Kopech. The second he opted out, I said, well, he can't help this year's team. Let's trade Kopech and get something we can use right now. People were like, you're an idiot. He's an ace. What, you know what? Don't worry about that shit. Just put it out there. And if it's well thought out and well put together, people will read it and give it a fair chance. I think at least in the White Sox Twitter circle, people will give an outside-the-box idea a fair chance as long as it's well put together and it's not just some hot take.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it starts, you brought up the hitting send. That's where it starts. You have to dive in if you want to do it. And don't worry about what's going to come back at you, because there's always going to be somebody who's visibly upset with anything that you say. Like, that's going to happen. But no, I think that there's definitely room for expanding on other thoughts within the community. Even posts that say, I agree with this thought and I disagree with this thought, and here's why. As long as you have, as Matt Nagy says, a why, you should be fine.
Yeah, I think materially just having enough, I will call it support or whatever for your idea, as long as you do that and push it out into the marketplace. And definitely if you have a unique idea, put that shit out there, get that shit out there. I mean, even if it's something unpopular or something you can't even, like, there's sometimes, we'll do this on the podcast, we'll do this in the blog, Treasy and I, we'll put out an idea that's a little bit half-baked, and we don't quite know how to explain it, but we're like, fuck it, we'll just put it out here, and let's get destroyed on it, or someone else, like you're mentioning, Tony, will pick it up and say, no, here's the application, here's how it could work, this kind of makes some sense. And so as a group, we're kind of crowdsourcing some thoughts and some ideas. No, I totally agree with you in that respect. I do think that the market can get saturated. So if you are going to put something out there that you are passionate about, something that, that doesn't exist. If you could find something that doesn't exist so much, and like you're saying, a twist on somebody else's idea is great, because it's not the exact same thing that everyone else is writing about, and we all find our little niches here or there. But I had someone, you're right though in the blogosphere about ideas not being enough of them out there. Like, I had someone reach out to me, and he was like telling me people who he liked writing, and it's like, yeah, these are all the same people that have been writing for the last 5 years. Like, there's no new names in here. It's like Steve, it's like Margulis. It's like, you haven't had any new come along. It's like, oh man, this person's really lighting the thing on fire. It's kind of interesting, and it dovetails nicely with your point. Like, more people need to start getting out there and writing stuff. I guess maybe everyone wants to be a podcast star, so they don't write anymore. But like, writing can be where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, just ask Sox Insane. He says that real content creators don't podcast; they blog. So
that's right.
I think there's definitely a medium for the writing to continue. You had an interesting DM to me the other day, though. You thought it was video is the future.
Yeah. So so we've been discussing that internally. 108. We've been like, should we be cutting down pieces of our podcast and doing shorter videos? Should we be doing ad hoc videos? Like, Treasy and I had the discussion about, instead of blogging something, should we just do it as a 3 to 5 minute video and put it out there instead of blog form? Now, you can't do that with every idea. If you have tables and shit, it's not going to work as great like me trying to just explain some table or whatever the fuck. But in some respects, like, some blogs,
if you can graphically get the table up there, Loaf, you can. I mean, I've seen this.
We've been doing that a little bit in some of these things, but sometimes it's just not the right medium for like doing it. But we've been given the idea of like, What if we just did 3 to 5 minute audio clips, and that was instead of a blog, like pushing out there instead of a blog? Just because we've been in the process of like pushing a YouTube channel a bunch lately.
Are you guys doing YouTube Shorts at all yet?
We did a bunch of them. Like I did a bunch like in the winter and everything. We caught a little steam there. Then I got busy as fuck at work, and I hadn't touched them. So we've been doing them intermittently, like cutting stuff from the podcast and throwing it out there. Or we had Brewhand Luke doing some like chugging beers on there, whatever the fuck. But like not as dedicated as we were, because that is another nice spot to pick up some content, is doing the YouTube Shorts for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually something I've got to give a huge shout out to two people who handled that for OnTap, Brian Lefebvre and Pat Bodway. Both of those guys, they clip, every show. Every show we get clips from, throw it up on YouTube Shorts, and even some YouTube segments, just like regular video, shorter clips from the episodes. And those have done pretty well. We got into YouTube a little bit later than you guys did, but I think it was just this year we started at like 5 subscribers because we weren't pushing YouTube at all. And so, in fact, I don't think we push YouTube nearly enough. Yeah, right. Like it's just another thing throughout the day to like.
It's a snowball rolling downhill though, because Tony, when we were first doing the podcast, Teresa had the idea we'll do a little post game show, put up on YouTube, and no one watches. We had 20 watches or whatever. Like no one would ever view it. And then when we decided to pick back up and do the live streams, that was years later, and then we had a bigger following. Twitter kind of helped a little bit, but yeah, I mean, it's something you've got to put a lot of attention to get it rolling, in our opinion.
We got most of our new subscribers through doing that, through Shorts. Nice. Like that's where it was. Most of OnTapSportsNet has had like no marketing behind it, really, outside of our Twitter account. It's just produce the content, let people find us. Something that my personal goal next year is to up the marketing aspect of it, but. Again, just putting the content out there, if it's done right, if you're following the best practices, and it's all stuff that's available online to you, you can find out how to, have better SEO. You can find out how to cut clips. You can.
That's something we need to improve on. I see you guys' blogs and the amount of tags you have on them, and we're always like, man, we're fucking up. We don't have enough tags on our stuff. We need to really work on the SEO game. Like,
I've got a very funny story about tags for you later, but
sounds good.
That was an interesting game. Like at this point, I feel like I've spent more time learning how Google works than I've spent on almost anything else in the last 5 years. But no, for real though, I think that video is really sort of the future here, and I don't take every bit of advice from Dave Portnoy, but I remember one thing that he tweeted that was out there, and I thought about it. It was back when before Mincy got fired for the first time over at Barstool. It was, or maybe it wasn't him, but it was, what's your daily status report? And it said 3 videos, 3 blogs, right? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, as somebody that runs a platform, like, should I start making everybody do 3 videos every day? And how fast would this grow if everybody was doing 3 videos a day?
Right.
If you follow the same process that we have with sort of the articles that we write, if 1 out of every 6 hits, that's beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful, because it really mirrors baseball. And I'm not sure if you guys have seen the same patterns, but for every 5 pieces of content, if 1 of them hits, that's awesome. Like for big numbers.
For sure,
so
yes.
you've got to have the volume there. And I think that, with video, some of that is going to be volume, and various different platforms. It's a lot more difficult than just running one YouTube or run one website. You've got TikTok, you've got YouTube Shorts, you've got to get it out on Twitter or X now, whatever it's called. Right. Exactly. Threads, everywhere. It's got to go everywhere. Facebook,
Instagram.
Put it everywhere. Instagram, it's got to be everywhere. So I think the video's got a larger barrier of entry into it to try and find your footing. But once one viral video goes off, I think you're pretty much set. I mean, there was a lady on a plane, and now she's all of a sudden like viral as hell. So yes. You just got to do something crazy with video.
I don't disagree. That may or may not be the future, but yeah, I mean, it's something we're looking into too, is pushing a little more of that.
I might need Buzz to go do another mudslide through.
Yeah, no, that was that was great in person, pictures, videos, everything. We got everyone got a million pieces of content out of that one thing. That was tremendous. Circling back, I want to talk about podcasting for a minute, because You've been doing podcasting for a long time. You mentioned it earlier, kind of buried the lead. You were one of the people that kind of pushed us one way, you guys should be doing a podcast. You did it. Josh Nelson did it. We had it from a couple different sides. Finally guilted Teresi into like realizing that he could do the back end, the technical side for us, which now the way how easy everything is to do. I mean, I'll put this up on the podcast feed afterwards, even by myself. So someone as stupid as me can figure this out. So everyone out there, you can create content. But what would be some specific tips you'd give about podcasting, Tony? As you've been at the game for a very long time, and I think there's a fair amount of people that watch this show and listen to this show that are into the content game.
Number one, I mean, have a beer. I mean, you're 108ing. I like to crack
always.
Have a beer and just loosen up. I think that's the most fun part about this entire thing is just being able to sit down, talk with like-minded people or even not like-minded people. It's always, you always learn something when you're having conversation. I know a lot of people get sort of screen shy or mic shy or public speaking is not exactly their thing. But, if you've got a supportive crew around you, I think that really helps you open up. So when you find the right people, and there's other people who do it sort of on their own. One of my things is like, I won't get on a mic really on my own. I haven't really done that much ever.
Yeah.
Whereas Ron Luce, like he gets on Cubs on Tap, he does broadcast, like all this stuff and can just get on there on his own and carry conversation for a half an hour by himself. That's super impressive.
That's impressive. Yeah.
That's very impressive. I've got to give him a ton of kudos. Buzz can do the same thing too.
Yeah.
Those guys, I don't know how they do it, but kudos to them.
For sure.
Not my thing. I like to have interactive back and forth with a co-host, but if you're getting into it, make sure you've got the right partner doing it with you. Like that's sort of, I think, key number one is have either a good friend or somebody who's super knowledgeable on the subject. Like I would say, Steve knows baseball stats way better than I do. I'll dive into them from time to time. Knows them way better than I do. Johnny brings way more organization to a podcast than I can bring. Buzz can carry in intros and do ad reads way better than I can. So everybody's got to play their part in what you're doing. And when you find the right team, I think that's important. Don't just go into it blind and say, we've got no plan here. You're probably not going to get very far. So, having rundowns, thoughts, make sure you know what it is that you're going to talk about. Like for me right now, Sox on Tap, it's sort of easy. You watch the Sox game, you talk about what happened. And then once they lose like 10 in a row, you just talk about how bad everything is. So it's the same, thing over and over
Recycle
again.
it.
You just sort of figure out different points of what's going on or what's hot. But for, just any other type of content, though, like make sure you come in with sort of a plan of what it is that you want to talk about and go from there. It doesn't hurt to practice either. Like it really doesn't hurt to practice. Sure. There's plenty of times, I don't know about you, there's plenty of times where, my shower thoughts or, early morning thoughts, commute thoughts are, what am I going to say on this? How am I going to frame this? You can't prep enough for it. So that's the other thing. And then be prepared for technical issues. Sometimes the internet goes out.
Right.
Sometimes, you
lose someone off the stream and you got to cover for them when they're not there.
Be prepared for the unexpected, I think, is really what you got to do is you never know what's going to happen and go from there.
Yeah, I love the thought on preparation because if I had one note to give to people who are new to podcasts is prepare more. Just prepare more than you already do because you really need to know inside and out kind of what you're going to talk about. And not saying you can't, you should be at the point too, like you mentioned, Tony, of having a good group of people. Have someone that you can bounce off of because chemistry is number two right after being prepared. Because when you have good chemistry with a group, you can go off in a direction and it's not, you didn't plan it, but you kind of right there. And that's you and the fellas on Tap. You guys hang out off the mic. So you guys are friends. And the same thing with us in 108ers. So when we get in here and we start cutting it up, we can go off in a direction if we need to. And I think a lot of times some of the podcast pairings end up being stale. Like it's like this is the only time you spend all week with the person or you don't know them that well. It takes time to kind of, build that chemistry between a couple people.
Absolutely. I mean, I talk with, Johnny, Buzz, Ron, Steve, the fellas that I'm on the podcast with pretty much every day. And I know that's the same for you. Mm-hmm. It's really sort of a small family that you build there. And I think that really helps the on-air rapport. It really, really does. There's a huge benefit to that. I would say, try and spend as much time with your podcast co-hosts as you possibly can, as long as they don't drive you up the wall.
And even if they do, maybe you can bring some of that to the show. It could be sensational. You never know.
Absolutely.
One last thing before we get going. How's Tony on food?
How's Tony on food? He's doing fantastic. I don't know if he's on Twitter as much, but he's definitely doing fantastic. He's still the same dude, still eating tons of great food and enjoying it.
I fucking love it. Tell him I said hi. Tell him he's followed back to Beeflo for a long time. Good man. Your old man's good man there. Tony, thank you for bestowing your podcast thoughts, building a brand, evaluating talent, and everything about the content game. Remember, we aren't trying to be right on the show. We're just trying to understand. Anything you want to plug before you go?
Follow OnTapSportsNet. We're going to be at the BMW Championship. Myself, Ron Luce, Jack Bushman, and Joe Chats will all be over there at the BMW. I'm supposed to be in a room with I think it's John Ram doing an interview at like 10 a.m. tomorrow. So
nice.
Should be some cool stuff. Big get for us to get ourselves into this tournament. I'm recently picked up some golf. Beef loaf. I don't know if you're on the golf loaf or beef loaf on the golf course much, but
I have not. I had Tom Fornelli on here recently, and he's just getting into golf, and he's like,
now that's a name that I will go back and say I wish I had him on ChiSox Weekly. Never had the opportunity.
It took us fucking years to get him lined up so we could actually have him on something. He's been on here twice. He's been outstanding. So yeah, he's also good people there. So
yeah, no, I've picked up some interest in the golf. I know my guy Jake Trojan, who was Jake Berger's doppelganger.
Yeah,
he's a big golf guy, way better golfer than I am. But we'll be out there covering the BMW and look out for our Hawks content and our Bulls content as well. I know Bulls on Tap, Buzz and Keith Franz are going to be starting back up here shortly. You're the basketball guy of the crew.
I played ball, but I do try to listen because I haven't been as plugged in with the Bulls. I'll watch occasionally, but I've been trying to listen a little more to some of the podcasts so I can get myself plugged back in because I played ball a long time ago. Now the game's different, so I got to make sure I know what's going on out there.
Well, I feel bad for anybody who's a diehard Bulls fan and a White Sox fan, like Buzz. Like that's got to be like super miserable to go through. Yeah, just year round Jerry Reinsdorf own team. So you've got to be. I know Sox Insane says he's insane for covering the Sox, but I think Buzz might be just as close to the insane point at that point.
Yeah.
Just tons of good people over on OnTapSportsNet. I'd recommend giving each and every one of them a follow. They're passionate. They work hard. They try and cover, as much as they can with the time that they can, and they do a good job of doing it. So I appreciate the opportunity coming on here and talking about all this.
Tony, it's been absolutely great talking to you. Let's get fucked up somewhere sometime, man. It's been too long, all right?
We do. We have to at some point. I haven't made it out to a White Sox game since I think June, so I'll try and make it out there at some point before the end of the season.
Yeah, holler at me if you do. Take care, my friend.
Have a good one.
That was Tony Marchese. That was great. I was glad to finally get that conversation under our belt there. Next week's guest is going to be Chuck Naso. So I'm going to have Chuck on here. I'm going to ask him what a social media director does for Barstool. Because fuck if I know. I'm going to have to do a lot of research to even try to understand. But he's good. He's been on the podcast before. I think you guys will enjoy him. Once again, thanks to Tony Marchese. Thanks to all the 108 family who's up in the YouTube comments. Appreciate you smashing the like button, comments. Hit notifications. Please do all that shit. We will see you next week. And I love all